It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. Well, that was our farewell with Charlie. Gutting, absolutely gutting.
We've heard from him.
Yeah, he's doing well actually. He said he's had a warm bed and a warm shower, so...
He's basically gloating.
Yeah. Anyway, Pete, this morning's Lectio, you spoke about that the real pilgrimage and distance is not so much the 300 mile pilgrimage you did 18 months ago, but it's the 18-inch journey from your heart to your head. And I was wondering just if you could expand on that a little bit. What was that like for you? 3 weeks alone. I'm sure God must have been doing a lot.
Yeah, he was. But you go first. What are we, like 10 days in?
Something like that.
What's been your spiritual journey alongside the geographical one?
Yeah. So I think last week we released a song, and I think that was really
people loved it.
Oh, that's sweet. But that was what it was about really for me. I was noticing that shame is something that I've dealt with time and time again. But I thought I had kind of got to a place that was pretty good when suddenly all this stuff started coming up, and I realized that God needed to do a work in that. And so there was a line in the song that I said, all this shame I've carried is left behind in the dust from my boots. And it was that sense of realizing that it's God that's doing the work. It's not something that I have to muster up, but there's just something in the process of going on this pilgrimage and this silence that God would do the work and do the healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just struck by this reservoir behind us.
Yeah.
You are sitting very precariously
Yeah.
right now on the edge of a dam.
Yeah.
And this is the third reservoir we've passed so far on this journey. And it reminds me, and this does link to your question, of a thing Bernard of Clairvaux said back in the 12th century. He contrasted reservoirs with rivers. And he said the trouble is the church is full of rivers rather than reservoirs. And what he meant was this: a river is dependent on the rain, and when the rain stops it runs out. But a reservoir gives out of its overflow because it has enough depth. And I think that with the crisis we are seeing in Christian leadership, where we've elevated anyone who is vaguely gifted almost regardless of their depth, their character, their personal holiness, I think, I don't know about anyone else, I don't trust myself enough not to take times like this to really try and attend to some of the depth and make sure that it's not just I'm gasping through to the next Sunday, get some ministry, receive the Holy Spirit, but actually that there's enough depth in me to give out of God's reserves and not just the little bit that I've got. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes loads of sense.
So I want to be a reservoir, not a river, is what I'm trying to say. And
that's a beautiful analogy, Pete. But you've managed to dodge my question.
Rats, you spotted it.
So back to the question. 3 weeks alone, processing all this stuff. Yeah, and you said it's not the 300 miles, it's the 18 inches.
Yeah, okay.
So what was that?
Okay. I'm gonna be really vulnerable, okay? There were two things that I was praying about, particularly when I did this walk on my own last time. And it's not going to sound particularly dramatic, but it's very deep for me. And it was this: every day I was praying about growing in patience and in presence. Patience and presence. And that was because I realized that I've become very impatient. and I didn't really know what to do about it. Impatient with myself, with God, with people. And that I'm continually, if I'm not careful, quite distracted. I'm not present to people. And this links with the thing we said back on either the first or the second day on the vlog, which is entering that third trimester, 50 to 75. You're in your second, right?
Yeah.
25 to 50. But the kinds of older people that I admire and want to be like, it's nothing to do with their CV, their resume. It's entirely to do with the kind of people they are.
Yeah.
And I think two of the great marks of godliness in older people, the kind of old man I want to be, is someone who has eternity in my heart. You know, that there's a patience with people. And secondly, that I would be radically present. I love old people and older people who are like that.
Yeah.
And so the thing that God showed me as I prayed a lot about that is this, that my impatience was a wound and my lack of presence was a lack of a skill. So let me flip that round. Patience is a sign of health and wholeness.
Yeah.
Presence is an actual skill that anybody can learn.
Right. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this was radical for me because I never understood it before, but learning to be present is like learning to do a good serve in tennis, you know, or a good golf swing. It's just muscle memory. There are skills that you can put in place every day to make sure that instead of being continually distracted, you are radically attentive to the moment that you're in and the person that you're with and to God's presence within it. And that's not something that gets beamed down on you, that's just something you either learn to do or you don't. The impatience in me was to do, the Lord showed me, was to do with a wound. See, when I was in my early 20s, the one sin I didn't struggle with was impatience.
Right.
Like, there were loads of others that I was struggling with, but that one, I felt I'd nailed it. It's the one I've got breakthrough on. I couldn't remember ever losing my temper. Sammy would say I was the most laid-back, chilled person she'd ever met. And then, second trimester, marriage. You suddenly find out you're not nearly as godly as you thought you were.
Yeah.
Kids. I was shocked to discover how impatient I could be. You know, like one of the babies is crying at night, you pretend to be asleep so that your wife or husband will wake up and deal. You just realise there's such ungodliness in me.
I feel like that's to come for me.
Yeah, you don't have kids yet, but
No.
marriage and parenting are often the crucibles of, you know, holiness and discipleship in our lives.
Yeah.
And also, it's not just life. It's been a quarter century of Christian leadership has done some bad things to me. It's made me too good at making fast decisions, acting and reacting, developing strategies, and I didn't even know if I could get that back again. But Jesus had only 3 years to save the planet, and he still had time for parties and picnics and fishing trips. So he was officially less busy than every Christian leader you ever met. So I wanted to get that back.
Yeah.
And I realised I needed some healing. So actually, I mean, I was phoning Sammy each night going, God's showing me something I never understood about myself before. And she was going, at last. And as she's a professional counsellor, but as a result of the 3 weeks of silence and solitude, I went back and actually embarked on getting personal counselling.
Yeah.
Just no great crisis, just wanted to do some soul work. I wanted to go deep like a reservoir,
Yeah.
and not just be flowing with you know, when it's easy, when the rains have fallen, I flow. When everything goes dry, I kind of dry up. I wanted depth in my life, and particularly in those areas, patience and presence. And I'm still not there. But I do think seasons like this, moments like this, intentionality like this, helps us to open our hands to receive the deeper work that God can't necessarily do in us in a 1 hour quiet time, or a great talk with a ministry time at the end, or a good Christian book. Yeah,
it's amazing. So to strive to be a reservoir, not a river.
Reservoir, not a river.
And I'm aware that we are in a privileged position to be here. It's a privilege to get out and carve out 3 weeks to come. For many
it's not possible.
Who are watching, it's not possible. They say this is a bucket list, it's a dream one day.
Yeah.
But what's something, just quick fire, 15-second suggestion, for those of us who want to learn to be reservoirs, what can we do in our lives as daily rhythms that can help?
Find anything that makes you more like Jesus, makes you laugh more, forgive more, more joyful, more peaceful, and pursue that. Even if it's playing football or going to the movies or listening to a particular piece of music or cooking, the enemy will try and stop you doing those things. But if they help you become more like Jesus, do them. That's the first thing. Second thing is, almost anybody can do a day of prayer a month. And I know at that point some people say, well, I can't, but I used to do one, and it was like this. I'd plan it in advance, I'd arrange it with Sammy, with friends, kids, my schedule. And I would walk to a particular country pub, and I'd try and chat to God as I walked. I'd get to the pub, I'd have a meal and a pint, I would journal a little bit, read a couple of chapters of a Christian book, and then I'd walk home reflecting. So that, it was like about an hour and a half, 2 hour walk each way. So that's like 4 hours of walking, an hour or two in the pub. So it's a day. But most people, when I say that to them, especially if they've got any introvert in them, says, well, that sounds like heaven. Anyone can do that. You've just got to schedule it in a bit. And then let me drill it right down, especially thinking of people who are unwell or people who've got very little children. There's no harm in taking a bit longer in the bathroom than you actually need to. You know, that extra 5-10 minutes in the bath or on the loo with a book, so make the most of that.
And on that bombshell.
Bombshell, not bumshell. Are we allowed to say that?
No.
I don't know about you, I feel this has gone downhill without Charlie.
It hurts.
I miss his manic laugh.
I know, it's infectious.
Ah well, you get what you get. Hope that's been helpful. Thanks everybody.
Miss you, Charlie.